I want you to listen to something. Do you hear it? I hear it all the time. It's the cavernous sound of things not being said. I listen to silences in organizations and meetings because quite often they're much more articulate than what is being said. A few years ago, I met a young woman named Susan who worked in the call center of a large cosmetics company. And a new product was being introduced. She was being told about it. Her manager said it was hypoallergenic, never tested on animals, all those great things. She knew there were standards and certificates for this sort of thing, so she started to ask about them. Look, it's just fine, he said, brushing her query aside and leaving in the room an awkward silence. At night, she told her mother what had happened at work. She said she didn't really feel very comfortable. What was she going to say to people if they called up with allergies or skin diseases? Her mother gave her a great piece of advice. She said, well, don't just sit there. Do something about it. We all get stuck in those moments of awkward silence. Surveys show that 75% of executives have issues and concerns at work that they simply don't voice. In the United States, the reason given is fear of recrimination. In Europe, it's futility, a sense that it won't make any difference. So fear or futility, you can take your choice. The upshot is the same. Our silence guarantees no change. The next day, Susan went into work and she talked to some of her colleagues. Were they worried too? Yeah, they said, but they didn't want to make trouble. They were sure it was legal. I don't want to be legal, Susan said. I want to be right. She had a friend in product marketing and he allayed many of her concerns, but he wasn't so sure about the hypoallergenic part. Did many people call in about that? Oh yeah, said Susan. Allergies are a very big deal. The phone script changed. And a few years later, a new brand emerged. Nobody ever gave me any credit for this, Susan said to me, but you know, every time I look at those bottles, I think, I started that. We all have questions and doubts and concerns at work, and for the most part, we do nothing about them. So what should you do? Well, it starts with questions. Are you alone? Are you the only person who's worried? We all have hunches, and you know, sometimes we're just wrong. But if it's a big problem, the chances are other people have noticed it too. It continues with questions, small questions that are easy to ask and therefore easy to answer. Has anybody thought about? Does anybody know more about? I wonder if, do you think we could? These aren't declamatory questions, they're exploratory questions. You can't answer them with a yes or no, so they start and they continue a conversation. They aren't designed to drive to a conclusion. They make everyone search for a conclusion. When you allow this kind of exploration to occur, what happens is you make or you create allies, people who go down the road with you, reach their own conclusions. So now you know more, you have allies, you aren't exposed, and you aren't alone. The cost of silence is around for all of us to see. At Abu Ghraib, in the Catholic Church, in the banking crisis, in any industrial accident you care to name. All circumstances where hundreds, even thousands of people knew something wasn't quite right, but did nothing. Many of us, of course, won't have to work in situations quite as critical or disastrous as those, but we all live and work in places where something is begging to be said. And the magic of asking questions is that the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's like any talent or muscle. The more you practice it, the more powerful it becomes. Try it today at lunch with colleagues or with your family over dinner. After all, that's what family dinners are for, not just to eat, but to practice the fine arts of question and exploration with people who simply can't fire you. There's another cost to silence too, and that's all the things that could happen, but don't. There isn't a company or industry I've written about or worked in that at some point didn't face an enormous economic, social, technological, financial challenge that everybody knew about, but nobody dared to mention. But when you dare to disagree, that's where creativity and innovation begins. What gets in our way is the idea that we have to know all the answers, but you don't. You just have to know how to ask a great question. One of my very best technology ideas came about when I dared to ask an internet veteran, do you think it would work if? Now, this could have been really embarrassing. I could have revealed my bottomless ignorance. But as it happened, it kicked off a conversation that led to something real. Has anybody thought? Has anybody noticed? What if we tried? These are the kinds of questions that uncover what's wrong, but uncover also the hidden potential that lies inside all of our organizations, our technologies, and in ourselves. We all have these questions knocking at our head, begging to be let out, and when we dare to let them out, we discover who we are. Another hero of mine, Cynthia Thomas, the army wife from an army family, did this. She had a lot of questions about the young men coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They looked fine, but she sensed that something was wrong. She talked to doctors. She talked to veterans. Why was nothing being done? Was it really that simple? Publicly and prominently, she set up a place where veterans could get help, support, psychological counseling, where they could feel safe. And Cynthia said something to me that everyone in this situation has said to me. She said, I never used to know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but now I know. I found myself in this cause, and I'm not the same person anymore. Ask questions, connect the dots, make allies, change the game. The heroes of our age aren't the kings and queens that stand on pedestals on city streets. They're people like anybody in this room that knows the power of a great question, followed by another one, and another one, and another one. The questions that don't stop until we've all had to think again. You ready? Yeah.